Good evening and welcome everyone, and good afternoon for those of you on the West Coast. I'm Thane Rosenbaum. I'm the creative director of the Forum on Life, Culture, and Society. We call ourselves FOLCS. We're at Touro College. And in association with our partners this evening, the New York Film Academy, welcome to our third installment of Conversations on Essential Cinema, a virtual film club. We started this new program. It's already immensely popular. This is only our third. We did it, as you may remember, in connection with the pandemic to give everyone a chance to watch some truly meaningful content. And you know how this thing works. We give you links to a classic film, and then when we come like we do tonight with we break down the film, we talk about its aesthetic elements and its cultural significance. And tonight we're really excited about this for a lot of reasons. We have the film, The Graduate, and our special guest is my longtime friend and buddy, William Fichtner. There's Bill. He'll come to us in a second. You may remember Bill. There he is. There he is. There's William. Bill's front. You've seen him, of course, in so many films such as Black Hawk Down and Armageddon and The Perfect Storm. And he's co-stars in CBS's hit television show, Mom. I personally love films that he's been in with Jodie Foster, Contact. The Oscar-winning film Crash, in my opinion, he, in one scene, steals the whole movie. It's an amazing scene. And there's an amazing episode of The West Wing, I've told him this for years, in which he co-stars with Glenn Close, where they both play Supreme Court justices, dueling Supreme Court justices, which is really perfect. And a very funny film that not everyone has seen is one with Jeff Bridges, The Amateurs, which I always love and recommend. We're going to be discussing The Graduate, the 1967 classic film, Mike Nichols' film, starring Anne Bancroft and Dustin Hoffman and Catherine Ross. And before we talk to Bill, just to remind you, if you want to chat, communicate with each other, you can push the bubble, the chat button. You can comment freely to each other throughout the night. If you got questions for Bill, leave them in the Q&A box, and we'll try to get them. All right, Billy boy, welcome. Thanks so much for doing this with us.
It's my pleasure. Nice to at least see you online.
Yeah, we used to know each other. First of all, the audience should know we've known each other a long time. You're going to actually see an hour of two guys goofing off together. I mean, it's going to look like that, two friends.
That's okay. We need a little goofing off in this crazy world.
You'll notice in Bill's in man cave behind him, there's this poster. I don't know if people can see it. Coldbrook. That was Bill's first feature film that he directed and co-wrote, right? You actually co-wrote that as well. And it was an award-winning it's a small film. It won a number of awards at festivals. I just saw it recently on Cinemax or Showtime, so you can actually watch it. It's called Coldbrook. It's starring, and it was directed by and co-written by William Fichtner. And there's the poster right behind him.
Right behind me.
So when we talked about this, and I said, Billy, it's time for you to make a FOLCS appearance. I said, I got this new series. This is great. You'll love it. Your first comment was, can we do The Graduate? That was what you said. And I said, yes, of course.
Yeah.
Totally do The Graduate. It was on our list anyway as essential cinema. We haven't had it, so it's yours. Tell me why you jumped so quickly for that film.
It's always been like, it's not like I watched the film that often, but it was the first film outside of, Jungle Book and Ice Station Zebra and these films that I saw in big theaters when I was a kid. It was the first time that I saw a movie that absolutely floored me. And it's a great story of how I came to see the film the first time.
Yeah, let me hear that. Let's the audience hear that.
Yeah, but it's also, kind of, appropriate because, listen, let's face it, the class of 2020 got absolutely screwed this year. I mean, we didn't get a graduation. We got to talk about graduates a little bit.
Right.
So I have this girlfriend. Now, here's the deal. I literally made phone calls today to guys that I went to high school with because we all talked about The Graduate when we were kids. But I know I didn't see The Graduate in the theater when it came out late '67. I went to see a film. I had this girlfriend named Jenny, and every year she would go away with her family for a 2-week vacation. Well, I was so crazy in love with her. I was in 10th grade, so we're talking like 1972, and she went away, and I was all heartbroken and mopey. So I went to the local movie theater, the Holiday Showcase.
Now remember, the audience doesn't know, this is Buffalo.
This is Buffalo, right outside of Buffalo, suburb of Buffalo, New York. I go to see a film. I don't remember what the film was.
Yeah.
I walked out of the film, and it's just like 1972. I walked out of the film, and as I'm walking out, people were walking in another movie. Well, when I was a kid, if you were walking out of one movie and people were walking another, you went right in that crowd and thought, I have nothing else to do at 14 years old. So I go right in, and I have no idea what the movie is. I mean, like none. So I go in, I sit down, and The Graduate plays. And I think it was a good 4 or 5 consecutive days after that I went back and got a ticket for the other film because I knew The Graduate was rated R, I believe.
Right.
And went and saw the film over and over and over.
Wow, all week.
That whole week, the whole week.
Wow.
So I was just floored by it.
Can you remember the 10th grade William Fichtner? What floored him? What was it about? First of all, let me ask you this question. At that point, did you think acting was in your future?
No, I didn't think. The thought crossed my mind about being an actor junior year of college.
I see.
I have a political science criminal justice degree. So I really wasn't thinking about, no, not at all. I mean, I used to sit in my dorm room with the keg thing. I think I could be a cop. That sounds like a good idea. It just wasn't really meant to be. But I do remember what it was that hit me that very first time. Because first of all, it was right off the bat in the opening scene of the film. I was like the height of the baby boom. My class, the graduating class in high school of 1974. In my hometown, Cheektowaga, New York, Buffalo's biggest suburb, there was 600 kids in my graduating class. There were about 10 that had a little bit more and 10 that had a little bit less, and everybody else was pretty much the same. I remember sitting there watching this film, and this was a world and people. I didn't know what Beverly Hills was, but I knew we were in California from the opening scene of him flying in. But I knew that this was, and I also was a caddy at a country club, and I remember thinking, those are the guys that I caddy for.
Yeah.
But at the same time, here's the character of Benjamin, Dustin Hoffman, playing that part. And all of a sudden you're so locked into, his emotional space where he is. And I felt like where he was and the world that he lived in was so foreign to me, but there's nothing that he didn't do in the film or go through in the film that at that age in my life, at least I wasn't beginning to have those sort of sensations and feelings about it. So, I mean, it literally took me, I was getting those sort of emotions. I was on that road, but it like shot me down the road watching a movie.
So do you think
exhilarating? I mean, just exhilarating. Your heart kind of like blew up. I was like, whoa.
By the way, did you ever tell Jenny about the film?
Yeah, I told her when she got back from vacation and said, can you not do that next year?
Because it made me see a movie. It made me see a movie every single night of the week.
I know that I picked up the soundtrack album. Yeah, that was.
There's a lot to talk about there. So let's start with this idea. First of all, one question is, so of the 10 on one side and 10 on the other side of all that graduating class, you're raising one question is that it particularly should resonate with people who just graduated because it makes one wonder. Is that what you're saying, that it does raise the question of what's next?
No, what I really meant by that of out of the 600 kids that I graduated with, 10 had a little bit more.
I see.
10 had a little bit less. Everybody else was pretty much the same.
So nobody was like the Braddocks. There was no one.
No, far from.
Right.
But as I said, I caddied at this place called the Park Country Club
Yeah.
in Buffalo, New York. And, you know, everybody that seemed to own a car dealership was a member. And they kind of reminded me of the folks in the movie, not making any judgment. They just did. And I knew that was a world that was foreign to me, but it was the emotion of what he was going through, the emotion of that film that locked into, like, it was just timeless, universal, and you know, for everyone.
So we'll get to some of those themes. One question I'd ask is, years later, when you became an actor, if you ever revisited this film or thought about this film, or if you've seen it more recently, now, filmically, cinematically, is there something, or what's going on for you? Acting in particular, special? What about anything about Nichols' direction? I'm just curious to get an actor's perspective. Is there something in there that we should be looking at and thinking about that was, you know, uniquely good?
Yeah, how long's your program? 5 hours? Listen.
You're saying there's a lot there, right?
There's so much there. And, you know, all right, so I see the film when I'm 14. It's an emotional experience to me. Do I know about shots? Do I know about cuts or editing or anything like that? No, but I'm blown away by the music because I know the music. We have to remember that even, outside of the song Mrs. Robinson, the songs in there, like Scarborough Fair and Sounds of Silence, they came out on previous albums.
Right.
Mike Nichols put them in there because he loved the music.
Yeah, but also, Bill, one thing it's important for the audience to remember, what's unusual about this film is that it had they never had any other music. There's no internal music. He didn't actually order up someone doing music for them. They just continued to just play those three Simon & Garfunkel songs, the entire film.
Well, there is some score elements, but what's interesting about them, as far as I know, what's interesting about them is they're really just versions of those songs.
Yes.
Slower piano versions. I don't know if there are other things. There are other songs.
To Dustin Hoffman, Benjamin walks out. This was great. I saw this the other. Sorry to interrupt you, but there's a really wonderful moment. He's in a jewelry store in Berkeley. He must be buying a ring, and he walks out whistling the song. How clever is that? He's whistling the song.
I know. Well, my appreciation for what Mike Nichols did in that film has only grown over time. What did I understand about? I mean, there are scenes in that movie where it's one shot.
Yeah,
the camera rolls for 4 or 5 minutes. It doesn't cut. There's that scene with Benjamin and Mrs. Robinson in the hotel when they're talking about Elaine and everything. They click the lights off. It's a good solid 2 minutes in the dark, and you just are hanging on their every word, getting back to such a strong emotional through line of what a love story.
So, when the American Film Institute did its best 100 films of all time, it's now revised that list 3 times. But I was surprised to read that in the first iteration of that list, it was 7. 7, right? So right. Think about that. We're talking about Citizen Kane, Casablanca. We're thinking about what was in the first 6. In the first run, and then it dropped to 17. It's dropped a little, but just to give you a sense of a film. The other thing I didn't realize until recently in looking, it was a blockbuster.
No, absolutely huge. I read something where, like, back in when it came out in '67, it made like $50 million, which today would be like $180 million. $180 million for an intimate love story like that is. Yeah. But the other thing that I've read more about and understand more about over the years is that Mike Nichols' use of music like that, music that we knew and was released, and it had never really been incorporated in a film quite.
Is that right? No, nobody ever took.
that's what I've seen interviews and people,
Hmm.
that nobody ever quite did it like that. Well, listen, I mean, as you said earlier, they're literally, Scarborough Fair plays like 3 times in the film.
Yeah.
Sounds of Silence plays 3 times, and almost the whole song each time.
And including, and it both begins the film and ends the film in the bus. That's what they're listening to. That's what the audience is listening to.
Exactly. And then that whole montage when he's just figuring out his life as his affair is going on with Mrs. Robinson.
Yeah.
That's also plays under Sound of Silence.
There's a great anecdote, which I actually don't know if it's true. Maybe you know it's true. That when Nichols went to Simon and Garfunkel and said, I need more stuff. I need more songs. And Simon apparently said to him, I have a song that deals with sort of like the loss of innocence of America that mentions Roosevelt and something and something and something. And he says, it's going to be Robinson, not Roosevelt.
Well, it was Mrs. Roosevelt.
Oh, right. Mrs. Roosevelt, right. Yeah.
So that got flipped out. But also apparently that I read that Mike Nichols wanted the whole song.
Yeah.
And Paul Simon gave him as much as he got for the film.
Right.
And then after the film came out, then he released the full version of Mrs. Robinson. Because the full version that is, that we're used to and hearing on the radio and everything, or albums or whatever, is actually not in the film. It's a shortened version of it. It sounds ever so slightly different. Great. But just incredible music.
So let's take a look at the themes of the film itself, because I love the film, but I'm ambivalent about the film. Like, for instance, would you say that it is, given our relative same age, we grew up around the same era, we're a little, in some ways, it's true, we're a little young, frankly, for it, right? We're about 5 years young or so, I think, to really get a sense of the 60s of it. But I would say people think of this as a cultural touchstone, a time capsule of the 1960s. Is it? Because whenever someone says that to me, I go, really? And so let's talk about that. I just, people say, oh, this is a defining movie of the 1960s. And I think, okay, Simon and Garfunkel, that is not the defining music of the 60s. Like, when you think about what they were, right? It's funny. It's based on a novel that's written in 1963. The movie comes out in 1967. You know what happens in 1967? A lot of things that didn't happen yet. Martin Luther King has not yet been assassinated. Bobby Kennedy has not yet been assassinated. Lyndon Johnson has not even said he's not going to run. Right? Nothing, right? There's no Woodstock, right? I mean, things really start rolling after the movie, right? So can we talk about that a little? Do you actually, when you think of it, do you think of it as a touchstone of the 60s? Because I look at it and say, why is Benjamin Braddock wearing a suit the whole movie? Like, why is his hair so short? Why is like that? I look at that and I think, what in the 60s? There's one line about the Vietnam War. One line when Norman Fell, the boarding house guy, when he's reluctant to rent Braddock the room, and it's funny, they each go up a flight, and then he turns around and asks him a question.
If he's an outside agitator.
That's right, exactly. You got it. Outside. That's it. The whole movie. They're in Berkeley. They don't have anybody protesting. There are no signs, right? Nobody's burning anything. So I don't know. Let's talk about that.
Well, I do agree with you. I missed the 60s. I grew up in the 60s. I consider myself a child of the 60s, but I kind of, you really found my way in the 70s. All 4 of my high school years and college years were in the 70s.
Right.
But I think there's so much about the 60s that was happening then. Kids were going to Vietnam. So, far be it for me to say if it's the definitive moment, but it is, to me, a definitive moment about life and uncertainty, and placed where it was in that time period. I was 11, but was it incredibly, and did it feel like it captured all of that. It sure did to me. But, you know, was that the movie to define the 60s? I can't say. I just think that what it was, you know, I really feel like what Mike Nichols was trying to do in that film at that moment was pretty close to perfection.
Yeah. So and first of all, it's an interesting question. I hadn't thought about it. We've known each other a long time. So, but I just want to know, 1967, what was happening in Buffalo? I mean, was there much of a counterculture in Buffalo?
Well, no, there were steel plants is what there were.
That's what I thought, right? I mean, it's a blue-collar Buffalo Bills fans.
You know, but also, you know, sure, you know, 60s, 67, listen, I remember the summer of 67. I vividly remember it at 11 years old. It was, my parents were going through a divorce. You know, we were like the only family in the entire neighborhood. So that was kind of shocking. I had 4 sisters, my mother, no real male figure. I never forgot the summer of 67.
Wow.
I never forgot the music of it. I also remember that we had a tiny, tiny little cottage on the lake, on Lake Erie in a little town called Angola. And in that,
wait, this was for summer, or is this where you were living?
No, that was the summer. And right. Believe me, we didn't have a lot of money, but when we got to that cottage and realized that there were some kids that lived in those cottages year round, I thought, oh my God, I have everything.
Was it too cold anyway?
I remember that summer.
Yeah.
I remember that there were some guys that were leaving to go to Vietnam. Some of the older guys that were in some of the clubs that were in part of this cottage, these groves in this cottage. I remember that. I remember the music. I also remember that there was a feeling that wasn't there in 68. I look back on it now and I think whatever was left over from the 50s, whatever from the age of innocence, whatever was left over 67, I really felt that it still had something was part of that. I remember the college kids and the way they threw their parties on the beach and inclusive and this and that and the way they danced. And I just remember that was something special. Didn't feel like that after that summer.
So in the movie, it's funny. First of all, what you were talking about before, that 5 nights of William Fichtner watching it, sometimes I think of the movie like a filmic version of it, The Catcher in the Rye, you know, because a lot of it's the same kind of attitude, right? Sort of, you know, alienation, boredom, you can just see it. The film is reeking with a kind of, alienation, boredom, a kind of spiritual emptiness, right? It really is not a great statement about America, right? I mean, when you think about, we're in the middle of the Cold War, he spends the summer on a raft. He has no idea what he's going to do. He's worried about it. He's being offered a job doing plastics. There's a kind of emptiness. I mean, I don't know. The novel is, I'm pretty sure I'm right about this. They don't tell you in the movie, but it's Pasadena is really where they are. I'm pretty sure in the novel.
Really?
Yeah.
I've never read the novel.
Yeah. I think it could easily be considered Beverly Hills, right? From, LA. It looks a little like it, but in the novel, it's Pasadena, which
sure looks Beverly Hills to me.
Yeah. Yeah. And remember, the Robinsons and the Braddocks, all they do is throw parties. All they do is have dinner parties. They throw parties. There's pool parties. There is a statement there that is not very flattering about, why Benjamin feels so lost, right? That what did he come home to?
Well, getting back to, those opening shots with Benjamin at the beginning of the film during the graduation party that they're having for him.
Yeah.
This, and it keeps coming back to it. And I mean, the most powerful of those shots, or at least the one that's really going to smack you right in the head, is when he's standing there in the whole wetsuit. And it's just like, he goes in the pool and he goes to come up and it's just like push him back down and push him back down. And all he really wants to do is be understood. And there gets back to that thing, that emotional hook and through line that's probably more powerful in this film than I think any film that I've ever seen, because it just never takes a break from where he's at.
That's a good point. It's true. Because it opens, actually, when you said opening shot, I actually think what's interesting about it, the real opening shots are at LAX, right? Where he's on what are those walk things?
Yeah, it's the tunnel conveyor belt.
Right, the conveyor belt, because there's something there like Kafkaesque, like the processing of a human being, that he's like put on a factory floor and he's being wheeled into the next level of what next happens to him. And I think it's very powerful because he doesn't look very happy, and he's on one of those things, this conveyor belt, and it looks like he's being processed to the next level. And I think that, America in the post-war era was thinking about that, the bureaucratization of life, right? How everything is a big bureaucracy. So there he is in a suit, he graduated, and here he's moving to his next level. And, he's obviously from that party, as you point out, he's distressed, he's distressed. Everyone else says, calm down, sow your wild oats, spend a few weeks. But he just doesn't know.
Yeah, well, the first shot with him on the plane,
yeah,
you could see that he's lost. And the opening line is the pilot's voiceover,
Yeah, good point.
We're coming into a landing, and then you see him on the moving walkway, and he has a little bit of wonderment. He glances up at the ceiling a little bit, and then he walks out of the airport. He's got a little bit of a smile of like, there's a little bit of hope of like, here I am, and then boom, throw him into like this blender of 100 people, and not one of them he wants to talk to.
Yeah,
and he's a little bit stunned. So it's.
I love the scuba scene for two reasons. First of all, his father introduces him as if he's, I'm introducing you to my son, the graduate, and he comes out wearing scuba gear. So and I also like that the father says, I hope this works because otherwise I'm out $200. So if you're in the Soviet Union, you're watching this movie and you're saying, this is what's wrong with America, this conspicuous consumption, this affluence, how does he look happy that he has this scuba suit, right? I mean, what does it mean to be rich in Beverly Hills, right? I mean, I actually thought that the film has a real post-war, 1950s shot at what America looks like, what it's become, what its values are. And so that even though Benjamin may not say it, he's reflecting the kind of, this is it, right? This is it. I went to an East Coast school. In the novel, I think he went to Williams. But like, that's the idea, right? I went to an East Coast school. I was a cross-country athlete. That comes across in the movie.
Yeah.
I also received a scholarship for grad school. I don't know what to do. It's really, I know you have a son all going off to college in a few weeks, but it is, I just think it's an incredibly powerful, right? Coronavirus permitting. Well, you're sending him at least to a state that actually knew what a lockdown looked like. But I do think that it's a very powerful idea, right? I think it's a powerful idea so what was the point of that? What was the point of 4 years at Williams and the scholarship and the cross country when I have no idea what's next, and what's being offered to me is plastic? It's really powerful.
It's incredibly powerful, and it makes you think, it makes me think that this is the same house that he grew up in.
Yeah.
It is the life that he knew up until he went away to college, wherever that was.
Yeah.
Or wherever. He came back to that same place, and all of a sudden, after those 4 years, which I would assume were a good 4 years, but maybe they ended, with a real question mark on what is the next thing. And
right.
And I think that's, like you said, this sort of thing, this 50s sort of innocence. And I look at the film and I think to myself, I can imagine, the Braddocks and the Robinsons, buying those houses as young attorneys.
Yeah.
In the early 50s. And but now we're established and we're partners. But was your life really that different? And the next 15 years after that?
Yeah.
I don't think so. And Benjamin comes home and has to see that and is
You know, yeah, go ahead,
reminded of it again
yeah.
because he obviously it's a world where he came from.
Yeah.
And he's re-entering it.
Yeah, you just reminded me of a little anecdote. When I was a summer associate at a law firm in Los Angeles in the early 1980s, some guy said to me that he graduated law school in the East Coast, got in his car, and just drove to LA. He wanted to be in LA. He said it was around 1950. He then said the following. You may have heard this. LA was a wasteland. It didn't have restaurants. He said it was an industry town, but it didn't have things. He just said you won't believe it. Like it was really a wasteland. So he was describing how they were able to build this Los Angeles. Like he was a young lawyer in the 1950s, what you just made me reminded of. Yeah, the Braddocks and Robinsons, they were young lawyers and they were sort of building LA. By the mid 1960s, LA was now LA in many ways. And so I think that what you're seeing, what you reminded me is two men at the top of their game, with houses and a career, and they're proud of their kids. He's saying, you got to take Elaine out when she comes back from Berkeley. Yeah, you got to take Elaine out. Benjamin, what are you going to do with your scholarship, right? So the possibilities are huge for these men, right? So I was just thinking about that. When they were young lawyers, if the guy who told me what he told me is right, that in the 1950s was still a wasteland, it gives you a sense of what the expectations would have been on them by the 1960s.
I think, the other thing too, it's funny talking about LA because I've lived in LA now 14 years and, I'm an East Coaster.
Right.
I don't live in New York anymore. There's so many elements of New York that make me happy. This pandemic right now of like being home, this is when I really don't want to be here. This is when yeah. Anyway, I just sidetracked there for a second, just thinking about LA.
Thinking about, and I actually thought something I thought about the other day about this film is actually when I saw it again, is that, there's that opening scene, the scene when he takes Catherine to a strip club, Elaine, right? So she runs out, he feels horrible, he tells her he feels horrible, he gives her a kiss. So the next scene, they're sort of in that drive-in eating burgers.
Yeah.
And what's interesting, then he put the still Simon and Garfunkel music, and then they roll the, on the sports car, they roll the cover of the.
There's actually a different song playing there.
Oh, is that right? Because it's for the whole. It's for the right. You're right because it's for everybody.
There's this whole bouncy tune, which
they're like in
I've never heard before or since, but it's on the soundtrack album.
Yeah, it's funny. You're right about that. That's right because they're in that like sock hop looking.
And he leans to the car next to him and says, "Can you turn that down?" And right. I don't know if they think he said turn it up, but they turn it up.
Yeah,
and
so
he takes the thing and.
But the movie clearly makes you think that they only bond because neither of them know what they're going to do next. That's actually what they're bonding on. And I think that is a small piece of the film, but a very powerful idea that they went from this really shitty opening date because of him. Then he sort of takes a look at her and says, wow, she's stunning and interesting. And that's when they sort of bond, what I think is sort of, carrying forward this theme of alienation that somehow they anchored each other to them. They anchored themselves to each other.
His angst, it comes out and of course he has this whole thing where Mrs. Robinson grabs his hair and said, don't, and then he has this scene with her on the couch, like Benjamin, I told you. And he's like, what am I supposed to do with this? So they go out on this thing. He's got all his angst going on. He doesn't want to be there. If I show her a bad time, this whole thing will be over. But he steps outside of who he is. And, and it shocks him. And
he even says, I hate myself the other way.
It takes 2 tears from her for him to realize that, like, what am I doing? And then as the story goes on, you begin to also realize too that, what is Mrs. Robinson? What's her problem with her daughter? You find out in that scene when she grabs Benjamin's hair, that, you know, she had dreams in her life and everything, but they didn't happen because she got pregnant.
Right.
And blames Elaine. You know, her life, you know, her art major career is no longer part of her existence. So, you know, the two of them together, as soon as they start talking about, you know, I just feel like I'm rude all the time. And she's like, I get it. And, you know, both only children, you know, in less than great circumstances. And then lo and behold, and a single night. And I completely believe that that's entirely possible. In a single evening, just like find this bond. And, you know, it's capped off by throwing her the French fries. And
I love that.
You don't get better than that.
Yeah, no, and she smiles when she gets the French fries. You know, it's funny what you said. I hadn't thought about that because it makes more sense. When I saw it the other day, I was struck by something I didn't remember, which is in the third to the last scene, when before the cross is used to bolt the door, Mrs. Robinson slaps Elaine 3 times. She nails her. Actually hits her across the face, which by today's standards, we wouldn't make movies like that, right? I mean, I think that that's weird, especially for upper middle class Beverly Hills style. You don't expect it, but you made me think that it has a lot to do with the self-hatred of Mrs. Robinson and what you said a moment ago, almost blaming Elaine for the soulless life that she had. So she's, you know, this gorgeous girl who she wanted to show him the portrait of, but there's an enormous resentment of her.
Well, she says, Mrs. Robinson says to Elaine at the doors of the church when Benjamin's swinging around the cross, you know, it's too late. And she's like, not for me.
Not for me,
Not for me. And then you'd think that it would be Elaine that would slap her, but it's the other way around.
Yeah.
And Robinson slaps her, and it's just all that more, you know, I don't care if you slap me 100 times, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
You know, 20 seconds later, I'm with him.
You know, the art history comment you just made a moment ago, I think it's interesting because I remember thinking that was one of the funny lines of the movie because he says, would you like to talk? Right? And she has no interest in talking to him. So it's almost like Benjamin is demonstrating, I want more out of life. I even want more out of this meaningless affair, right? I would like this meaningless affair to have more meaning, right? So maybe she and I could talk about something. So he pushes her to then he says he starts interviewing her. So she said she was like, what was your major? And so it was before that where she said, what do you want to talk about? And I forgot, is it he or she says, do you want to talk about art? And she says, no, right? So then later when she says art history major, it's a great line when he said, I guess you lost interest or something, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's also, right, go ahead.
No, that's a very interesting moment too, because, you know, she's power woman and is just, you know, I hate to say the word predator because she's looking for somebody like him. But if you mess with her, she has that ability within her. But that's also one of the moments, too, that's really lovely because she's turned away from him in most of that conversation about art. And you see vulnerability there. And it's like the only time in the film that you see it.
Yeah. But I think it's because it's a lamentation, right? It's almost like this is forcing me to really don't do this. Don't make me do what I don't want to do. Think about why I am in a loveless, unhappy, suburban life where, yes, I have a great car and a nice house, but it doesn't have any purpose for me. And I'm, you know, I imagined a different life, a much more exciting, you know, stimulating life, and I got none of that. And don't push me there. Don't take me there. And in fact, maybe that's the argument that Elaine always takes her there by definition. Right? You know, that she's the reminder of how she got there. What about the idea? Here's something that I never understood about the film. Why is marriage the answer? You know, when Benjamin goes to tell the parents, I think, was that when the toaster pops up? I love that scene because it gives you another example of, like, you know, American consumerism, you know, like the four toasts all pop up at the same time, which, by the way, all the same. By the way, by 1967, I think was a big deal, Billy, that they all popped up.
With four that pops up? Come on.
Exactly. I'm saying it's a big deal. So he says it's the only time he looks happy in the whole movie. He says, I'm about to get married. Congratulate me, I'm about to get married. His parents go, who is it? Elaine. Oh my God, oh my God. They're screaming. And then they learn that he hasn't asked her. She doesn't know. And then the father says, it's half-baked. Right. I love that. It's half-baked. But it's a great scene. It's the only elated scene. And it made me wonder, why, given these marriages that don't look very good, they look imprisoning to anybody who's really looking at the film critically. Why does Benjamin think the answer at the age of 22 is the most conventional thing? And the reason I'm asking you this, Bill, is because when I think of that scene, I think, you know, the film that was competed that year for the attention of the viewing public was Bonnie and Clyde, right? Another love story, but it was a different, very intense road movie with really strong sexual feelings and repressed sexual feelings. Yeah. Think about those two movies, and that's, you know, I think it's interesting, right? That was what was going head to head, Bonnie and Clyde and The Graduate. I think the Oscar ended up going to In the Heat of the Night.
I believe that's true.
But everybody was nominated.
Yeah. To talk about what you brought up about this marriage thing. I've always gone with it. And it always seemed like if he could find that perfect love, if he had an idea of what it would be to be that happy with someone, it would be to spend the rest of his life with them. This is 67. There was a lot of Free to Be You and Me that came in the years after. But,
right.
To me, a little bit, maybe then, I don't know if that was the thought, but to me, maybe then that was a perfect marriage, seemed like a perfect place to go. I have to tell you something. My parents were going through a divorce, as I mentioned. Life was not easy, but I certainly wasn't having thoughts, even as a kid, of like, I'm never getting married. I kept having thoughts of like, well, I want to get married and I don't want to go through this. I don't know. I even at the end when they take off on the bus and everything, and it's post marriage. She actually just got married.
Right.
They kissed right after.
People really forget that, right? She's a married woman.
She's running out the door, but to me, when he walked into the kitchen and said, "I'm going to marry Elaine Robinson," the same feeling that he had, that elation that he had on his face. And it's not complete. There is some like, oh boy, is the same thing that's on the bus at the end. What he did get was to be put in this situation where he could share his life with her.
Yeah.
And whether it's the word marriage or whatever, that's the word that he uses in the scene with his parents. But whatever it was, he's there at the end of the film. And I would imagine that to him at that moment, that's perfect, no matter how nerve-wracking.
And why is she drawn to him? There's something about the film that also was, Dustin Hoffman eventually said that he thought it was ridiculous. In hindsight, it made his career. But he recognized that he was out of her league physically. He literally says this. He said, I really owe a lot to Mike Nichols because he could have cast Robert Redford. There were other people he wanted, well-known actors. Even Catherine Ross said something very disparaging about Hoffman, apparently, and also Hoffman raised the Jewish factor. He said, I looked Jewish. People said I had a big nose. That was some of the criticism. I'm supposed to be the son of a, lawyer in Beverly Hills, and I don't really look like that. But the question is, what is it for her? Why does she prefer Benjamin to Carl? Carl is a young doctor, good-looking, tall, blonde, Billy Fichtner looking. He's got a Hollywood handsome look. And Dustin Hoffman, by the way, we talked about this at the very first conversations in Essential Cinema when we did The Pawnbroker, because that starred Rod Steiger, by the way, who won an Academy Award that year for In the Heat of the Night. And there was someone who asked the question that night, she may be on tonight watching, who said that her mother was a huge Rod Steiger fan. And I remember she asked this question. We may hear from her again in 10 minutes.
So
yeah, go ahead.
So
yeah.
Catherine,
yeah.
What is it?
Yeah.
There's a bit of a leap of faith there, but I do think it lands somewhere in, you got to remember this too. Their parents are partners.
Yeah.
This isn't the first time they've seen each other.
That's weird, right? That's weird. Like they went to high school
together and pool parties and everything. I'm sure that they have been to each other's birthday parties forever. It's not that maybe they ever really connected. Who knows? But it's not like, they haven't been around each other. There's something there. I got to college. I met this lovely girl named Rosie. I knew Rosie an entire year. Really great friends and everything. And then one day we took a drive or something with another couple, and not really as like couples or anything. I had a light bulb moment where all of a sudden it was like, oh my God. I think.
Wait, oh my God. No. Oh my God. I don't know Rosie as long as Benjamin knew Catherine. I mean, Elaine, is that your point?
No, my point is that everybody has moments. I mean, Catherine comes home, knowing, kind of guessing a little bit when you start to fill in the pieces of the puzzle of what her life was like growing up.
Yeah.
How her mom feels about her, things like that. You kind of get that. I'm not so sure if she's all excited to get back home from college. I didn't gather that. A date to get out of the house with Benjamin, who I know since I grew up. Great. We go out. I have this horrible moment. And then I have this like incredible time talking to him. And all of a sudden I'm talking to somebody and I have a light bulb moment because I'm hanging out with somebody that, boy, I'm really connecting with. And it's great and it's cool. And then the whole thing blows up.
Yeah.
But he goes to Berkeley to see her and he runs after her in the bus and he waits outside her classroom and she goes and sees him at his room and is like, what are you doing? And all of a sudden he explains, no. What you were told is that's not the truth. And she knows that. And I think that she knows that what he's saying is true. That's not the truth.
But
So I feel like, he's jumping in a way, he's doing things in a way that they're hitting somebody right smack in the heart.
But what you made me realize, what I honestly hadn't thought about, which I don't know if it makes me like the film more or less, is that they're drawn to each other because they're so familiar. Like they feel a sense of alienation. They feel that anomie, right, of the mid-1960s. They don't know what's next. They're nervous and there's anxiety, right? But they're drawn to each other. The point that you made, they're almost grew up together like brother and sister. Their fathers are partners. In a way, it's almost incestuous. So of course, this is almost speaking to the longing of both of them of feeling lost and that they only find themselves when they find each other. So then it leads to two questions, and maybe we'll hit to some of the outside. Yeah. So one question is that something I had not remembered is that when Mr. Robinson shows up to Benjamin's room in Berkeley, and he says, "What do you have against me?" Right? And he says something like, "You don't really like the things I stand for." And I thought that's an odd line. Like, how the hell does Benjamin, is there something we don't know in the novel maybe? Like, what is it that you stand for? Republican values, right? We can assume, what is it, right? But then he says something, "You don't respect me." And then Benjamin says, "No, I don't respect you." What? Why? Do we know why? It's such an interesting, because, it's a moment where Benjamin is really rejecting the world of his parents by rejecting Mr. Robinson, who frankly is a very sympathetic character sitting in that room. I remember thinking, that is a heartbreaking scene. Gee, in 1967, he's driving to Berkeley to show up at a kid's room. What have I done to you that you would cause the divorce with my wife? I just think it's an incredible scene. And he says, I don't like you. I don't respect you. I don't understand that scene.
Well, I do think it's what's happening in that scene is it's Benjamin finding his truth and starting to be comfortable with it. When Mr. Robinson says to him something to the effect, I don't know the exact line, but you don't think very much of me. You don't respect me. No, and he says, no, I don't. As he is. I mean, listen, his world that he grew up in is not that different with his parents than what it is with the Robinsons.
Right.
His father barbecues and Mr. Robinson plays golf.
So you think he probably has the same feelings about his own father?
I don't know. I just think that it's you do live in a world. He's not mean-spirited when he says to him, no, I don't. He's not mean at all, Benjamin.
He's just honest.
He's just being as honest as he can, because at this point in the story, all he can find right now is honesty and truth in his own heart, and that's all he can hang on to. He doesn't have anything else at that point.
Right.
He doesn't know if anything else is going to work out at that point. And I do think that also ties into what we were talking about a few minutes ago with Catherine, and how does Elaine, what does she find in Ben? And, love and truth and when it's 100% is powerful for anyone.
And there's something also, right, you're right about that, the truth. But there's something also about that ending. See, there's two things in the endings, and then we're going to jump to questions from the audience. One is that when he's standing screaming Elaine, right, you don't hear, you only see the faces, the gnashing teeth of the people angrily, the mother, the father, and the husband, the fiance, Carl. And what's interesting about that scene is there's some music, either music or sound, but you don't hear what they're saying.
I'm pretty sure it's the organ of dun, dun. It's really
so
organ.
Yeah. So, but what is interesting is Elaine is staring at their mouths. It's like that's what the camera wants you to see. That she turns to the mother. She turns to the father, she turns to her new husband, and she rejects them. That's when she yells out Ben. She doesn't really yell out Ben, right? She waits, she walks up, and they all follow her. It's a very interesting scene, right? She walks, and they follow her. And they're all screaming, and she's just staring, and it's all surreal. And then when she turns around and looks at their expressions, that's what gets her to go. That's an interesting moment. I don't know what it is. Was it their anger? Was it that she really looked at them nakedly, right? She saw them naked, like their real selves, and said, this shit is not happening for me. It's just a very interesting way Nichols did that, right? It could have been done many different ways, but it's interesting. Catherine look at them and then look back at Ben and scream Ben. So I don't know if you have any thoughts about that, but while you're thinking about that, I know you have thoughts about this ambivalent ending. So let's just, we haven't really shown any of the clips. We're having so much fun. Shervin, show us three things. Show us the first one of the iconic scene in the bedroom. I want to make sure the audience sees the first still. Yeah, that one. The camera alone there, Bill, is worth the price of a ticket. That's where the camera was. And then skip ahead, Shervin, and show us the last two shots for Bill. Yeah.
Yeah, that's when they first sit down on the bus.
And that's a great still.
I mean, listen, that second still alone right there.
Yeah.
That's right there. That look right there. That's worth running out of the church for. Right there. No, that's it. Listen, if you get that in your life, let me tell you something.
Yeah.
Run. Go get it.
I love that. Billy, I love that. You're saying that explains everything that just happened.
You get that, you just won Powerball in your heart.
And then within 10 seconds we get that. Now that is an interesting scene, Bill, because I'm sure you've been directed in something like this. this is not, the director's not saying to, I want you to be miserable, because that's not what they're looking either, right? This is something else. Like, what is this?
Well, I heard Mike Nichols say in an interview that he said to his DP, let it run. Just don't cut.
Really?
Just don't cut. Let him smile. Let him laugh. And eventually they smiled and they laughed. And then they just sat there.
So you're saying that last shot was an accident?
Well, from what I heard, that he just said, apparently I saw this thing, and it was Mike Nichols in this interview, and he said they didn't have a lot of time, even though they had 100 days to shoot the film. 100 days to shoot a film? Oh, please, Lord.
Wait, no, explain to the audience. That is
I shot my feature, Cold Brook, in 20 shooting days. They had 100 on The Graduate. But they were running out of time that day. That bus came down the street, and they were like, we don't get this over and over. Let the camera run and just keep going. It kind of like we got a one-shot deal on this.
I see.
Pretty sure that's close to what happened. So they just let it run. But the beauty of it is they end the film on that. And those looks at the end, see, I don't see their looks after those beautiful smiles. And then we got to that third picture that you showed.
Yeah.
And I don't see that and think, oh, they're doomed. I don't think that at all. I think they're fine. I just think it's just like the enormity of my mother said to me once, and a very hard time in my life, she looked at me and she said, and this is a woman from Cheektowaga, New York, in our small town, and she took me by the hands and she said, the price of freedom is high.
Wow.
And I never forgot it. And if you want things and it means that much to get them, it's a lot. That shot at the end of that film right there is the price of freedom is high. You have your freedom, but it's high. You're gonna be okay, but it's a little stunning.
Do you think?
I love it at the end because it also makes me think. It also makes me think at the end. Well, it's not like she's calling her parents up and going, well, things have been a little different lately. I don't think that door's open,
right.
At least not for a while. I always just wondered, wow, where did their life go from there? But it didn't matter. And that is the point and the power of the movie, because it's an ultimate love story, and they found each other.
Do you think that in that scene that they recognize they have their freedom? They know that what your mother said is right. The price is high, and now we're feeling the price. But this is the price that we wanted. This is what we got. We negotiated for this.
That may even, listen, in life, if we were to go through a moment like that in life, let me tell you something. You don't run out of a church, throw a cross in the door, hop on a bus, and ride away and think, okay, let's see how this all works out right now. I mean, I think there's an element of absolute being stunned.
Right.
And I think they are stunned.
You're saying anything else would be ridiculous. Like if they were doing anything else, it would be ridiculous.
If they said anything else, it would be ridiculous. There is no words for there can't be right now. When I watch the film and I get to the end of it, literally the last 2 seconds that are before it cuts away to the credits, and cuts to black, I think to myself, somebody must wonder in a minute or two or 30 seconds from then, I wonder where this bus is going. Because
that's right.
There is no game plan, none.
Yeah.
And I guess if you have love, you don't need a game plan. You already got it.
Oh, that is a great way to end that piece, that segment. All right, let's take some questions for Bill. Here's just one that people ask. It's not the kind of question that I would normally do for our kind of programming, but I think it's important since Bill is an actor. This person is an anonymous attendee who says, what do you think about the fact that Anne Bancroft was only 6 years older than Dustin Hoffman and was playing the older woman? We don't usually get into process questions, Bill, but we have you here, so you can help us with that. I mean, is that there's Hollywood magic to that, right? Because frankly, Anne Bancroft looks like Mrs. Robinson.
My initial response to that is like, who cares? But the truth is, Dustin Hoffman was 29. Did he look 29? He looked more like he was 21 than he did 29. He had incredibly young features, a little bit of the magic of Hollywood. It's hair and makeup and the way, but also too, do not take away the fact of Dustin Hoffman was in New York then, working on and in the theater, doing incredible work. This incredible actors can take you places.
But remember, Bill, off Broadway, he wasn't even well known. He wasn't even well known to the theater crowd. He was well known to Mike Nichols, who directed Broadway, so he knew who the good actors were in New York. But a regular theater goer, Bill, I don't think would have known who he was at that time. I don't think.
But
knew who either Catherine Ross or Dustin Hoffman.
A great actor. Well, apparently Mike Nichols met Catherine Ross and was like, her essence is beyond Elaine, like just beyond, and like that's the woman. Apparently, that's Dustin Hoffman said to Mike Nichols, "I'm not really right for this."
Right.
But let's get back to the fact of like, he was 29. He was playing a guy who just turned 21. You pull that off with that's expression of an actor. That's what a great actor can do, and he can be somebody that has that angst, and you have that angst as a graduate, not sure where your life is headed. That's an actable thing. That's all Dustin Hoffman.
Mm-hmm.
Mike Nichols will take you and guide you, and I think he'd say this himself, but a great performance that comes within an actor. Dustin Hoffman brought that to the table. Anne Bancroft is beautiful and is sophisticated. Her look isn't just stunning. The way she's dressed, it wasn't hard to pull him down and to skew her up a little bit. She was 35 when the film was shot, but look at the way she carries herself. She was 35 years old when Dustin comes in to take Elaine out, and she's staring at him. Just that beautiful long shot. It goes on for like 30 seconds where she's just sitting in the other room, lounging back and just staring daggers at him. And does she look 35 in that? No. But what's going on inside of her and what is happening in that scene, what comes out of her is a woman that has an upset. It's that great and has that sort of maturity to it. That's an actable thing. And she brought that. So not shocked that 35 and 29 come off as Mrs. Robinson and Benjamin.
Let's take one more question, then we'll talk about some closing remarks. We'll say goodnight to Bill. This comes from one of our board members, actually, Brett Feeder, and I'm going to add to this. He's sort of interested in what we talked about, that ending. And, nowadays, we're always expecting to see sequels. It wasn't true in the 1960s. But he asks the question, what do you imagine of them 10 years later? And I ask you this because you're not just an actor now, Bill. You're a director and a screenwriter, right? You're wearing more hats nowadays, Fichtner. So could you imagine if someone came to you and said, Bill, we're really liking what you're doing as a writer and as a director. Would you take a shot at The Graduate 2? What would you do with Benjamin, and Elaine? Do you think there's a story there? 10 years later is 1977. Now we have all that baggage of the 70s that you and I now even know more intimately. I don't know. Do you think there's something there?
I heard Dustin Hoffman in an interview once talk about the fact that I think it was like in the 80s where it came up.
Really?
Of a possibility, because Dustin Hoffman had an idea of how he thought that could work. And they were married and had children. And I think 10 years would be, I don't know, 10 years might be too soon to have it be 77. I think, I don't know. I have to tell you, this is one of those ones too, especially as you say, this day and age of like,
Yeah.
I don't know, I can't even follow some of these like big superhero things. They're in like the 12th version. But sometimes you just gotta let something go. I mean, look at The Godfather 1, 2, and 3. The Godfather 2, it's like, really? And it's like just as good.
Yeah.
It's like, oh man, you walked across coals.
Yeah.
Just, wow, that's amazing. How about give it a rest? It's not that everybody didn't care and try in 3, but sometimes the magic just, isn't there.
And so you would have left it alone. You just reminded me of something, Bill. I think I'm right here. I could have sworn you just triggered a memory. Wasn't there a Kevin Costner movie with Jennifer Aniston in which they try the idea that it's based on that story, and so that Costner is the actual Benjamin? I don't know. There's sort of a memory that they.
Yeah. There is kind of I didn't see it, but I know what you're talking. Who else was in that? Do you remember?
I just remember it was Costner is technically who Benjamin Braddock is, but again, it's fictional. So what they're saying is he's the real character. I don't think it's really I don't think he goes by the name Benjamin Braddock, but that the movie takes the position. It's based on that story. I don't remember, but I just was reminded.
This is ringing a bell. Was Anne Bancroft in that movie?
I don't know. I just remember Costner and.
I know. So do I.
And Jeff Aniston. It would be great. It would be great if Bancroft was in that movie, right? That would be great. All right. Before we say goodnight to Bill, let's just show you some of our upcoming programming. Shervin, let's take a look at some slides. Let's see. What do we got? It's coming up. Yeah, there we go. This is part of our film series, not our conversations in cinema. This is our actual FOLCS film series. This is a premiere film. We have the premiere at FOLCS. We got it. It's The Cuban. It stars Lou Gossett Jr. from A Certain Generation. He won an Oscar for supporting actor for An Officer and a Gentleman. And it's a new film. It's by an internationally acclaimed director. And we will have the premiere of the film on FOLCS with Gossett Jr. and the director. And that's on July 26th. That's coming up next week. What's next? Yes. The Jeffrey Epstein affair. We have that night, we're going to have the director of the documentary, Filthy Rich, which is a new documentary that is a must-see film on Netflix about Jeffrey Epstein. But before that, we have the director, we have a reporter from the Washington Post, and we have 2 of the lawyers representing the victims of Jeffrey Epstein. All right, next slide. That's July 29th, 7:30. Conversations in Essential Cinema. I'm really looking forward to that. This is the young actress, Margarita Laviva. I don't know, Bill, you ever seen her before? She's been around. She's done some really good work. She's also been a guest of FOLCS before. And what's great about her, among many things, is she was born in the Soviet Union. And she and actresses like Mila Kunis, they came here because of the end of the Cold War. So she came here at the age of 3 and now has a career on Hollywood and in television. She's got a series coming out in Netflix soon. So on August 2nd, we have Dr. Zhivago, and it'll be analyzed by a young girl who actually is a product of the Cold War. We thought that would be an interesting little take on that. All right. So, right. Isn't that a cool idea, Bill?
Yeah, that's really, really good.
A really cool idea. I thought you would like that. So that is what date is August 2nd. That's a matinee. I think that's a weekend. So that's Margarita Laviva with Dr. Zhivago. And then August 26th, the Sharon Stone. We don't have to tell you all the films, but certainly Casino, for which she was nominated for an Academy Award for Best Supporting Actress, and Basic Instinct, and all these other films. The great Sharon Stone for Casablanca. I just had a thought that if there was going to be someone to do Casablanca, it should be Sharon Stone. When I called her up, she said, absolutely. So she's very excited to do it. No, she really was. She was very excited. And frankly, you know, she thought it was like almost honored to have that film. If I'm going to do one film, let me do Casablanca, which many people believe, including the American Film Institute. Bill, I don't know if you agree with this. This is oftentimes referred to as the best screenplay ever written. People really refer to this at the AFI Institute when they did their top 100 screenplays. Casablanca won. All right, so that's August 26th. And then, of course, we're extending our deadline for the International Short Film Competition. We host it every year with the FOLCS Awards, the Red Carpet Awards. Bill, you'll love this. We have filmmakers from all over the world every year. South Korea, France, Canada, Iran, submitting films with social justice themes. 20 minutes or less is the film in any genre, including animated, documentary, comedies, anything they want to do. And then we screen the top 8 films, and then we hand out awards. We call it the FOLCS International Short Film Competition. The deadline now is extended to July 31st. So look on our website. If you're not already on our website, in order to get information about upcoming events, we're at folcs.org. There we go. FOLCS.org, where you get to see really cool things like William Fichtner. We have not shut down during the pandemic. As you know, as a public service, we ramped up. So if you've been entertained by us, if you've been enlightened, have you gotten smarter? Remember, the end game for us is walk away smarter. And with Billy Fichtner today, I think we all walked away smarter. So if you feel that we've served that mission and you want to donate, we'd appreciate it very much. Folks.org. Billy, you are really a great friend, and you are an amazing actor and a really fine mind on cinema, and in such an incredibly charming presence. Always true about you. I'm sure the audience utterly fell in love with you. All of them now are about to rent another Billy Fichtner movie. So thank you.
Graduate.
The Graduate they've already seen in order to get ready for you to discuss.
See it again.
So now let's see. Let me think. You really, can I just say something? Go see Contact. Billy Fichtner's role in Contact. I don't know if you agree with this, Bill. You were just unbelievably great in that. You play a blind character, Jodie Foster, sort of go-to man. And it really was, I think for many people, it was maybe the first film that people saw you in widely. Is that true? Yeah, I think.
Yeah, it was, that was obviously a big studio film.
That was a big deal. Yeah. I mean, that was the first film I saw.
That was a really big deal for me, especially because I played a couple of parts in films that were tough guys. And then I didn't want to do that after like 2 or 3 times. And then I didn't work for about 8-9 months, maybe even close to a year. And then I auditioned for Contact, and I really wanted that. And it kind of changed the way that I work a little bit, because by the time I got hired and by the time I started working on the film, I had an opportunity to have like 2.5 months to just spend time finding out a way of working and finding the guy.
Right. Well, that is, yeah, no, I don't want to interrupt, but I just want to say that he did find the guy, because you seem to have lost weight for that film. You developed an arched posture. You really captured him in a way that it was very moving to me as your friend. I want you to know, we were friends at the time, and I was very moved because, I used to see you at the gym every day. And then all of a sudden I saw you playing this very vulnerable, fragile man, kind-hearted, loving. There was almost a romance with Jodie Foster. It was an odd film, right? There was a Matthew McConaughey, and then there's you. And she's really torn in an odd way. You're her spiritual center. It's interesting. And he's a spiritual person. So it's just a lot of interesting things. So anyway, there's a lot to see of Bill Fichtner. If you go on IMDb, William Fichtner's made tons of films, lots to see. But we're so grateful that you were with us. You'll come back, right? You'll do something else?
Absolutely.
All right, Billy, good night. Thank you, everyone. Come back to
so much. Bye.
Good night. Thanks, everybody. Come back for more events.